Now, if you see the second page, you might have seen what has happened in Ukraine. A children's hospital was targeted by one of the Russian, allegedly a Russian missile, in which 41 children died. Now, this basically again is again an ethical issue in warfare. What are the areas that you demarcate as the no go zones? For example, the vulnerable section you shouldn't be targeting, and this was also being discussed by the prime minister with the Russian president Vladimir Putin. So we'll talk about that as well. So this is the first thing that is there. Then this is an important news, something which is happening in NATO. I asked you to read about NATO. What are these 32 countries, and how does NATO work, and its relationship with EU as well, and what is the other axis that is there, the history of NATO. So now Mark Rutte is being appointed as the head of NATO, which is basically called as the General Secretary. He will replace Jens Stoltenberg, and he comes from the region of Dutch. So basically, he's someone from Netherlands, and he's there. He's been in Netherlands as the prime minister for 14 years. Now he's going to enter the office with a lot of issues. For example, there is a push in the entire Europe towards the right side of the political spectrum. If you see the seats that are won by national the NR party, which is the right side party, is again quite high, and throughout Europe you are seeing these right parties coming up, which are typically very ethnocentric, and also they are very kind of light on Russia when it comes to any kind of sanctions. Apart from that, the coming of Trump is also going to be a major issue, because he has always said that the Europe should pay for its own war, and the role of US should be less. So the idea is to address this entire issue of the Ukraine and Russia conflict. Again, the use of words is going to be very important, folks, when you're doing, or when you're studying international relations. There's a difference between a conflict and a war. India always maintains this is a conflict, while the world has declared it as a war. So again, India's stance is something is that we are going to discuss today as well. So the idea is how to make the European security less dependent on America and try to make it Trump proof, is what Mark Rutte will be trying to do. So read about this article, and the issue related to it. Now, PM tightrope, killing of children, very painful, listening to Putin. I have hope. Basically, he had communicated. He actually got the highest order of civilian order of Russia, which is the order of Saint Andrew the Apostle. You can read about this particular order in the explained page, but at the same point of time, and the after meeting in 2022 at Samarkand, where the honorable prime minister had told Putin that this is not the era of war. He has now also said that any kind of destruction and any kind of attack on children is is something which causes pain, and the heart simply explodes, and the peace talks will not succeed among bombs, guns, and bullets. At the same point of time, what you should also understand is our stance has been basically of not signing any kind of agreement against Russia. For example, we have abstained from voting on any issue when it comes to UN, and there was this Swiss dialogue that happened recently, and in the Swiss summit, the peace summit that was held, India basically did not sign the joint communique. If you see, India did not sign the joint communique, and it basically said that all the meaningful partners should be there to have a peace accord. You cannot have the chief architect where when the problem where the problem is arising, and have a peace deal. So this is what has been India's stance all across. And also the fact that our trade has increased by a significant amount. In fact, our trade has increased by 66% in the last few years. We were targeting somewhere around $35 billion by 2025. In fact, it has reached $66 billion, and it's majorly because of the kind of oil imports that we are doing. And this entire thing has not been taken very positively by the Ukrainian president, who says that or the foreign minister, who says that the every barrel of crude oil that India gets has a good portion of Ukrainian blood in it. But you have to see the issue from a larger context. So if you are not aware of what this Russia Ukraine issue is, you should also go into history of this entire issue, when the entire Western world had promised Russia that the NATO will not move a single inch. And year after year, what we are seeing in NATO is expansion of NATO, which of course will threaten a state like Russia. And you have these repercussions that you have seen in Crimea. Before, there was something called a Crimean War, and then you have something in this thing as well, Ukraine as well. So you have to read and study this entire issue in its entirety, with its history, and not just its current context. Then let's go to, now there are 2-3 pages that I want you to read, folks. One is 1, 2, 3 articles by yourself. One is bill to set urban land property records authorities in works in Delhi. This is something for Delhiites. You should be reading this particular article. And this is the page that I want you to read, where you're talking about India Russia joint statement of terror and condemned attacks. I've already told you about this $100 billion trade target that is there. And then Russia and India agree to spend on delivery of military spares, because it is one of the biggest military suppliers. But one of the issues with respect to military is that the secure supply of spare parts that is needed. So you can read that. Another interesting article: IRS officer gets center nods to change name and gender. But this is something that I will cover. So the issue here is that of terror in Kathua. Now what we are seeing is, and you can read these two articles together as well. What we are seeing is, in India, that you have these terror attacks that are coming up in the Jammu region. So you should understand the map of Jammu and Kashmir as well, folks. Now when you see this, what has happened is that you are now having a new activity in the Jammu region. Earlier, what the theater of operation used to be the Kashmir region, but what these non-state actors with aid of state actors. Now what do you mean by non-state actors? Non-state actors are all these terrorist groups and militias that are there, which are being supported, which are not part of direct state. They are not directly Pakistani army, so they are not state, they are non-state actors, but they are being supported by the state of Pakistan. So they have kind of a funding, that the funding of resources, funding of money, funding of trainings. All these has been is there from this thing. And we have seen 6 major attacks in Jammu in the last few months. And this has taken, although number of the lives lost have reduced significantly, but at the same point of time, this should not deter the elections in the Supreme. Even the Supreme Court had mentioned that the election should happen in Jammu and Kashmir. So this should not deter that. And then security, of course, is a major issue that needs to tighten up. And we also need people's engagement and participation in the process of representation and accountability, which is extremely important. And our policy since 2014 with respect to Pakistan has been on 2-3 fronts. First, we say that terror and talks don't go together, so we have not have any direct engagement with them. We might have had a lot of back channel engagement, which has helped us reach a ceasefire on the LOC, but at the same point of time, the tier 1 communication is not there. And after the abrogation of Article 370, when Imran Khan was the Prime Minister, there was cessation of trade links as well. Now we do not trade at all, and because of this, again there are huge hardships that are there on either side, but more so on the Pakistani side. So these are certain issues. This is and with the third stance that we have operated with Pakistan is cornering them on international fronts. And one of the ways that we did that was through FATF, Financial Action Task Force. So you should read about what Financial Action Task Force is. But all that Financial Action Task Force has done is that it has only shifted, and it has only changed the character of funding. So if you see, Pakistan, although Pakistan is nowhere to collapse, no major country desires this outcome in the volatile space with a nuclear arsenal, but also there is no sign of Pakistan establishment abnegating a terrorism. It is only recalibrating and adapting to its terror activities by taking out notorious faces of terror machine in response to FATF punitive actions. So this is what has happened, and we need a better strategy, a better punitive strategy to deal with Pakistan. And at the same point of time, Pakistan is also besieged by multiple problems, and it already has a very volatile border with Afghanistan, and it cannot afford a disorder on two sides of its frontiers. So this is the article that you can read. Then jobs still. Now if you remember, we did an article yesterday. In fact, we are going to do an article today as well, which is on the CLEMS data of RBI, which talks about employment, which also talks about productivity, labor productivity, capital productivity, total factor productivity, all of which you should understand, folks. Now if you don't understand this, let me explain a bit about how our economy is and what we should be doing. Now India is a labor surplus economy. It's a labor surplus economy, and because it is a labor surplus economy, we should typically employ labor intensive production activities. That means any kind of production that we should take should involve more of labor and less of capital. It should be capital saving and labor intensive. Whereas what has happened in India in the last few years is we have become much more capital intensive and labor saving, because of which the employment that we are generating in the country is not able to absorb the amount of workforce that we are or the labor force that we are having. So there is that mismatch that is there, and this is also part of the India employment report. And the CLEMS database says that we have the employment in the country grew by 4.67 crores in 2023-24. I need to see how they have come up with this number. This is a huge number, but at the same point of time, the provisional estimates basically are not disaggregated. But typically what we know from other sources is that what has happened is that India's labor force participation rate, people who are either working or willing to work, has increased, especially in the last few years, because of women entering the labor force. But the problem is the quality of the labor force. Women are entering the labor market, but they're not finding stable jobs. They are going for self-employment and as employment in household enterprises, which shows that there is stress in family income, in family levels, because of which women have to get out of family and then start to earn. And this is also corroborated by the survey of incorporated sector enterprises, which affirms that the labor force engaged in informal the informal sector and unincorporated sector is around 11 crore people out, and there are around 6.5 crore informal firms. So all of this shows that we have a huge informal sector that is there, and we have not been able to create non-farm employment in the country. And till the point we don't have a strong relationship between GDP and non-farm employment, we will not be able to grow sustainably. So this is an important article with respect to understanding the employment needs of the country, and there's a lot of data that is given. Something as an economics optional, anyways, you should remember all this data. You should note these data points. But even for GS, you should note these some of these numbers which are important. Then out of sync, in office out of sync is basically what is happening in France. Now we've already read about this national rally, which is the right side of the political spectrum, and despite winning the maximum popular vote in the first round, and if it was India which goes by the first past the post principle, national rally would have been elected, would have won the elections. But since in France it's a 2 round election, now again I want you to read about the election cycles in France and how does their polity operate. Now they have a president who's the actual head, but then you have their parliament. So anything which has been said and done by the president needs to be ratified by the parliament. Now because we are entering the France is entering an uncharted era of coalition politics led by the left. Emmanuel Macron is probably going to face a parliament which he's not used to. So anything that he does might not be ratified by the parliament. That is where a lot of friction will come in governance of this particular area, this particular country. Then next is a mockery of parliament. You can read this. It's a political article. Now the article that I was interested in, again data points that you should note. Now since Jawaharlal Nehru to Narendra Modi, all prime ministers have spoken about the importance of science and technology, but at the same point of time we see that historically nothing significant has been done on this particular front, despite be achieving spectacular achievements in terms of atomic and space energy. And the reason is also given why atomic and space energy has done so well. Now when we talk about R&D, India spends around 0.6% of its GDP on R&D, a number that you should remember, and all major economies are spending, and our target is to increase it to 2%, and all major economies spend around somewhere around 2 to 3%. In fact, South Korea has 4%. And of that, also very important, of that India spends the most amount, which is basically by the government. So the government is basically taking most of this expenditure. If you see, the Indian government accounts for 56% of the expenditure, whereas it is just 15 to 17% or 20% in the rest of the countries. And apart from that, what also happens is the kind of investment that we do, 44% of this R&D expenditure that we do is on capital development. For example, buying land and resources, so construction and acquiring of real estate. So what we do is, when we want to do R&D, we'll say we'll open a new center of R&D, and 50% of our funds will go to that opening of that institute, setting up the building, buying of the land. So this is where our money gets wasted. And this is despite the fact that in the budget of 2022-23, the finance minister had announced a national research foundation. Now we read about what is this national research foundation with a corpus of 50,000 crore rupees, but there has been little progress out of this. And if you see China's progress over the years, it has moved from 0.7% of its GDP in R&D to 2%, and it employs more than it employs 10 times our the money that we spend. So they are spending around $500 billion. We are only spending around $50 billion, and the workforce that it has in R&D is also significantly higher, 5 times higher than what we have. So we cannot be left behind in this age of science and technology, so to say. So that is extremely important. And what we can have, just like we have CSR funds, we can have a funding like funding for research and development, 2% of the profits of corporates. And if any company is not able to spend this 2%, then that fund will go to the National Research Foundation. So this is the entire article. Please read about it. It's a very important article for GS as well. Then coming to explain page. Now explain page, you can read what is the order of Saint Andrew the Apostle, which has been conferred on the Prime Minister. This we had already read in one of the news earlier on the front page. We'll talk about this particular article, this and the most important article of today, which is the High Seas Treaty. Now, to understand the High Seas Treaty, you should also be aware about a treaty called as UN clause, which is called as UN Convention on Law on the Seas. Now, when you read about this particular treaty, you will see that this treaty talks about the governance of seas and oceans, and it talks about territorial. It also deals with territorial waters as well as international waters. Now, what are territorial waters? Territorial waters are further divided into three parts. If you see, I'm forgetting how it classifies it. I think it's 14 nautical miles, and then 14 nautical miles, and then 200 nautical miles, which we call is as the exclusive economic zone. So, for example, you have Chennai, which is on the coast. Now, 200 nautical miles into the Bay of Bengal, or whichever ocean, if it's an ocean that it's touching, 200 nautical miles from that particular position will be called as exclusive economic zones. That means all resources, everything that lies in that 200 nautical miles, is of the country that is there. Now, what we have is that what about water, what about resources which are out of this particular 200 nautical miles. Now, for that we have this new treaty which is called as Agreement on Conservation. So if you see this is the name of the agreement on conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction. It is also called as the Treaty of High Seas, because this is high seas basically, which is a global common, and it is also called as biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. So this is the treaty that is there, and it is also guided by the UN, basically the UN principle of conservation and protected areas, which says there are three major objectives. The first objective is conservation and protection of marine ecology, and then the second is equitable and fair and equitable use of the marine genetic resources, and third is environmental assessment of any particular activity that can degrade a marine ecosystem. But what is important is this takes into consideration the area which is not the part of which is the part of global common, which is beyond the economic zone of a particular country. So it kind of reinforces the UN clause with this particular agreement. Now we have only planning to sign this, but signing does not, by the way, constitute the enforcement of the particular agreement. You have to ratify it. For example, in countries like us, our parliament needs to pass it. The executive, the president can sign it, but the parliament needs to pass it for its ratification. Now I told you about this nautical miles and exclusive nautical miles. Apart from that, if you see, you can read this part. There is an area of marine protected areas. Now typically all the marine protected areas are in the exclusive economic zone, but there are also areas which are in the high seas, which are over polluted, over exploited, and there is diversity loss, and we need to take care of that under the Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, a separate international arrangement. Countries have agreed to put at least 30% of the degraded coastal and marine ecosystems under restoration by 2030. So you can read about this framework as well. Now, the resources that you're going to find in this common area, for example, you get a fish or any marine any organism which can be used for, whose genetic properties can be used for a drug discovery. All these benefits are to be shared with everyone, despite the cost might have been done by one country. And ratification I've already explained you. Then The next thing is with respect to in government's neat line recalling a 2021 case. Now there was a case in the last decade where what had happened in between 2014 and 15. There was a exam which was conducted by DSSB, so Delhi Subordinate Service Selection Board, and there were head clerks that were filled under this particular under by this particular body. Now there was a preliminary test, and then there was followed by a mains test here, and there were only 8,000 people who actually wrote the exam. Now there were a lot of there were a lot of issues with respect to irregularities in this paper leaks, people setting together, and because of this, DSSB basically verified the candidates from a particular zone where a lot of issues were found, and it found out that there were a lot of impersonations as well, and of the 290 candidates in the zone, 9 did not report for verification, others 281 did. Now once the entire process was seen, and the DSSB noted that the corruption or whatever the issues that were faced were only in a particular zone. The entire in a single zone, the deputy CM had basically Manish Sisodia had cancelled the entire process in the exam, and some candidates had approached the central if you have an issue, if you are a part of government, then you approach the central administrative tribunal, and the central administrative tribunal had set aside the deputy CM's order and said that out of the 290, only 9 did not come for verification, 281 come, so why should they be blamed for it? And this was and the DSSB and the government of Delhi had appealed this to High Court, who also upheld the tribunal's decision. But when this particular thing came to the Supreme Court said that if the irregularities that have taken place are systemic, the credibility and the legitimacy of the entire process is if it's vitiated, and then it has no option but to cancel the entire process, the entire examination. Now but for this we have to be careful about separating two kinds of students who have done wrong and students who have not done anything, because there is a right to equality under Article 14 as well. And since the court found that there were serious flaws in the DSSB process in terms of the turnout and admit cards, it said that the entire credibility has been eroded, and therefore the scrapping is right, which was said by the Deputy Chief Minister. Now the application is also here in need whether the beneficiaries of the leak can be separated from the tainted candidates or not, and based on that this thing will be there. And then you have the defamation case. Now in defamation case, for example, what is happening is ANI, the news agency, Asian News Agency, has moved to Delhi High Court for defamation content on ANI's wiki page. Now these are social media intermediaries. Now you should understand the Information Act 2000 as well. Now under the the definition of a significant social media intermediary is defined under section 2 of Information Act, and which says that any person who on the behalf of other person receives, stores, transmits, records, provides any service with respect to that record, that includes telecom service providers, network providers, internet service providers, web hosting providers, search engines, online payment sites, online auction sites, online marketplaces, and cyber cafes. So all of these are social are basically this thing, social media intermediary, because they are helping create this entire part of this entire media. And then you have section 79, which is very important, which basically is the exemption of liability of intermediary in certain cases. Now Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, they cannot be held liable for anything that I do. because they are only the marketplace, they are only the connectors. But the protections that can only apply if they do not in any way initiate or initiate the transmission of message in question. So they should not be the ones who are initiating it. And under the digital media ethics code, now this is very important folks, please make a note, you should be having an idea about this digital ethics code, both for your ethics paper as well as for your governance, which basically says that all of these social media companies should have a grievance redressal mechanism, along with a resident grievance officer. And if the government had asked the intermediary to remove something and it does not remove, then the safe harbor clause is removed. Safe harbor here basically means then when a ship it is in its harbor, when it's at the port, it is safe, but when it is at sea, it is not safe. So to take use of these safety norms, it has to comply with the government as well. So you can now read about this particular article. Now last part, please read this article, what the latest job data show a bump in employment, and why this data shows a bump in employment. Now we have already talked about this particular CLEMS database, that it provides database for a lot of things. Now wait a second, where is this? Now if you see the workforce, it says that the workforce in the country in 2023-24 has jumped by 6%, has increased from by 4.67 crore from to 64 crores. Basically this is the increment amount. So it was earlier in FY23 it was 59 crores, and we have moved to 64 crores, so roughly around 4 crore people we have added. And this data comes after Citi Group, which has said that the country will struggle to create employment opportunities even with a 7% growth rate, something that we have already been reading about. So please read about this particular entire issue, the Citi Group versus the RBI data, which says that the employment has increased. So read about this particular article and this database. Then US economy is no longer overheated. Maybe you can read this particular article as well. And RBI cautions against accounts using fraudulent transactions evergreening. This thing, just have a read on this. Also please read financial inclusion index. What is this financial inclusion index? Index captures financial inclusion ranging from 0 to 100. 0 represents complete financial exclusion, 100 includes complete financial inclusion. So, and this index is based on these parameters of access, usage, quality, and where does we lie. So around 60 to 64%, it's around 64% according to the financial inclusion index of RBI. I think it's given by RBI. So read about this. So this is all about today's newspaper, folks. Now we will meet tomorrow with the details. Now I'll also be sending you a reminder message today with respect to D3. Alright, so I'll see you tomorrow, folks, at 5:20. Alright, see you. Bye bye.